My guest today is Sangeetha Kadur. Sangeetha Kadur is a wildlife nature artist. Her work includes large murals, posters, and book illustrations. She also conducts journaling workshops for children. Welcome to Wild Women Interviews, Sangeetha. What's your greatest fear?
Oh, thank you so much for this. My fear. um, yeah, I think somehow, for some reason, like somehow not being able to immerse myself in nature for some reason at some point or something. Um, that's on a personal scale, I think. And otherwise, I think sometimes, not being able to, like, scared that people don't really understand the seriousness about um, the importance of nature and living alongside nature, and always keep thinking how to get them to love nature, or I'm just scared that how that disconnect will will affect wildlife or nature around us, yeah, in some ways.
Which living person do you most admire?
Living person. um, Definitely, I would say my brother. Always amazed by how he working so hard and getting things done, and so determined and focused and everything. Otherwise, I think as an artist, there are plenty of them, so many of them that it's hard to name. But amongst them, I think Robert Bateman is one of the most ideal persons of mine with regard to art. Um, yeah,
Mention the first person who comes to mind.
with regarding to art,
Yeah.
I think Bateman and Kim Donaldson. I think, yeah, he's done a whole bunch of series on African wildlife. Really nice.
Okay. So tell me about yourself. Were you always into nature and art?
Um, I think as a child, as a young one, I think I grew up with nature a lot because my father and my uncle would always take us to the forest all the time as a child. And my dad, I think, because he's an entomologist, he always got us to look into the smaller creatures like ants and bees around us. So somehow it's always been ingrained in our lifestyle. Like, I always remember being outdoors, engaging with nature. But then I didn't think art I was interested in. I was like always doodling or scribbling or something, but I never thought I'd take it to this level at all.
So you trained to be an artist. You didn't study wildlife. So you chose art as your profession, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was how
Yes,
you entered the field.
Yes, I went into art college, but art college was very different for me. It was not anything to do with wildlife or nature. It was just trying to build the skills of becoming an artist. But at college, they would nudge us to do more abstracts and more, very different kinds of paintings, including human figures and things like that. But I always wanted to do something more nature-based, nature-oriented.
So were you certain even then as an art student that you would go into nature rather than any of the other avenues that the art college exposed you to?
At that point, I don't think I was very sure about it. I took up art because I was interested in art, but I didn't really know about wildlife art as a option at that point of time. And also, many of my paintings, I used to use a lot of nature and leaves and flowers in my artworks. But then, I think it was after graduating. I think during graduation, my final year in art college, that I went for a bird survey in Bandipur, and I met Sunita Dhairyam, who was painting this big wall, and then She was painting a leopard and in jungle lodges, and that's when I'm like, wow, it can be an option. And And as soon as college got over, I think I started in that direction.
So was that the defining moment of your life where you could see the two interests combine?
Yes, very much. Initially, I think when I started going bird watching with a bunch of Bangalore bird watchers, they used to show me a lot of books on wildlife, sketches and artworks and everything. But then I still didn't think that was a career option at that point. You know, I was amazed by it. I was interested, and I started doing something like that, doodling birds and whatever I could see around me. But I really didn't know I could take that up as a career itself.
So who at that time were your inspirations? I mean, you mentioned Sunita Dhairyam. Well,
Mm-hmm.
did you look up to other people at that time, as an artist?
Yeah. So at that time when I started off, yes, it started with Sunita Dhairyam. Then, of course, Maya Ramaswamy was around and she was illustrating wildlife all the time. And I used to always be curious about her works and everything. In the close circle, yes, they were the two people that I looked up to. Yeah. And I started looking up online. And within a year or two of my getting into this field of wildlife art, I got into a project on hummingbirds. And over there, a person called John O'Neill, I happened to meet him in the US when I went, and it was great meeting him. He opened my eyes up to a different world altogether, painting birds.
So you worked on this hummingbird project almost immediately after you graduated, right?
2 years after. Yeah. First was my Bandipur work, and then I started doing some murals in Bangalore. And I tried whatever I took up, I tried to put in a nature theme to it. So even that it was a Montessori or something, and we painted plants and birds around in the Montessori. And uh, I think right after that, that's when my brother saw that I was really interested in it. And then he decided to put me in touch with people in Gorgas Science Foundation and see if I could be part of the project.
I would imagine that it would have been a difficult project to start off so early in your career. First of all, hummingbirds aren't in India, so you wouldn't have been exposed to them. So, how did you make that leap?
That was a very tough leap, actually. It was, in fact, the very first hummingbirds that I actually painted, and to try show it to them, it was, I don't think I would want to show it to anybody now at this point of time. It was like the huge birds and the details. Like, I know they're tiny, but I think to understand how tiny, I think I had to like see them. Even I didn't get to see many hummingbirds when I did go to the US. I also saw some dead specimens of them, just one or two of them. But the paintings I did initially, they were, yes, anyone could identify it to be a hummingbird, but they were huge and they were like, they could have been better. They could have been better. So initially, when I started off, I was scared, and I signed up to the project, but I didn't really know how I would take it forward. But the organization itself, Gorgas Science Foundation, Mr. Locke and John O'Neill were like amazing. They really believed in you, and they asked me to try it out. You know, not be scared, just try it out, see how the first few plates come, and if it's well enough, then I can be part of the project. So, but they gave that initial push, nudge, and they trusted in me and asked me to just play around and figure it out. Yeah.
So, I would always imagine that the Indian equivalent of the hummingbird is the sunbird. Had you,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just asking if you had painted them before to gain experience before you went to the States to do hummingbirds.
I think I had done very tiny, small sketches of them in my sketchbook, but I hadn't painted a big painting of sunbirds at that point of time yet. Yes, but after the project, I happened to paint a sunbird painting. Not many yet. I do want to. I hope someone can just sponsor a book on sunbirds or something. I would be happy to work on that. But yeah, I would love to. Yeah.
So sunbirds, I'm sorry, hummingbirds have this metallic sheen, like an iridescence. So were you able to capture that in your paintings? And do you think you succeeded?
I would say imitating nature is really difficult and a challenge. I think to an extent, I think only to a small extent, I probably would have done it because the sheen is quite tricky. And I remember that the initial paintings I wasn't happy with, and I've redone a few paintings to get it right. And I think it was, I would say to an extent, I think there's a lot for me to learn as an artist to get the right light and shade, you know. To an extent, I've tried my best to imitate it, but I'm not sure if it's the
Do
best.
you have any images to show us?
Yes, yes, yes. Let me show you one or two hummingbird paintings that made for the book. Are you able to see it by any chance?
Yeah, so what are we seeing here? There are 3 different hummingbirds.
Yeah, so there are 2 different hummingbirds.
Sorry. Yeah.
So it's the male and female
Oh.
of the one is the ruby-throated hummingbird and the black-chinned hummingbird. These are amongst the most common North American hummingbird species that they see. And it's the female, the ones that are more whitish on the belly. They're the female of the 2 species. Yeah.
Right.
So here, one of them has a very ruby throat, as the name suggests itself. And the other one is the black-chinned hummingbird, which is blackish and bluish on the gorget.
So how long did it take you to paint this?
Initially, it would take me longer, but I think towards the end, I think every painting would take me about 15 to 20 days, 15 days about. Because also we would put in 2-3 days into the research of the work itself, you know, gather a whole bunch of information about it, photos about it, and then you know, try to put together a composition. How do I want it? You know, figure out what plant that it feeds on, and figure out how I would like the composition. Do a bunch of key sketches, and then put together the whole painting.
Is being scientifically accurate in your illustrations important for a work like this? For instance, you're not really doing scientific project, right? I'm asking, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So this particular project on hummingbirds, it was, I think it was both a scientific project and as well as artistic project, wherein we tried to club both of them together. We did do all the research as to what the colors are and all its behavior, and try to put in as much details as possible. And at the same time, because we could compose it how we like, you know, and we try to make it painterly and more elegant as well.
So what are we seeing here?
This is the purple-throated fairy, purple-crowned fairy, yeah.
And what are the plants?
These are Heliconias. Again, one of them is Heliconia, wherein, and also the behavior that I'm showing here is something called nectar thieving behavior, wherein they're not going through the natural opening of the flowers, but they are like pinching at the bottom of the flowers to get to the nectar more easily.
Yeah.
So we every painting that's the thing, we would do a whole bunch of research and try to see what different behaviors we could show, and in what angles we could show them, so that all the features are visible, more clear. I think that's the advantage we have when we are painting, opposed to photographs.
So how do you decide I mean, it's a book on hummingbirds, but how do you decide what plants to include, for instance, and how to frame it? Like that bird that you just showed, the wings were on the downward stroke. Why would you choose
Mm-hmm.
that?
I think again, the whole flexibility is given to the artist as to how we want to portray it. At the same time, we had a researcher on board who would tell us what plant to associate with which bird, because that is the science that we got into the project, wherein we wanted to be um, accurate with most of the details that we show it to people. And again, she had researched as to, the plants and everything. She would tell us, and we would do our research, find out more about the plant and the interaction, and then we would depict that in the paintings.
So how long did it take you to work on this project, and how many paintings did you make for it?
It took us a long, well, from the day got started on the project, it was in 2006. And the day the book came out, it was 2016. It's 10 years. But then I think we painted, initially I was the only person on board, then two other people, one my cousin and another artist from the US, joined on board after a year or two. And together we worked for about 4 5 years. By 2012-13, we were done with all the illustrations. And the first book has about 100 and, okay, I don't remember exactly, but we have about 120 odd species, and illustrations about 99, 101, something like that. And yeah, and each, I think I painted about close to about 30 species, 30 plates. It had more species. Some plates had two species together. So about 30 plates for the book.
So I'm going to talk about wall murals now. I mean, I imagine, like, when you are doing something like that, the size of your canvas or paper is, you know, a tabletop or easel above sort of size. But when you do a wall mural, when you're drawing, you have no sense of the scale of it. Like, you don't know whether the line you're drawing is how it fits into the larger scheme of it. And often you have to take several steps back to look at what you've done. So how do you do something like that? I've always wanted to ask an artist that.
Okay. There are different ways of putting a big mural, working on a big mural. I think most of the ones that I've worked on, it's not too many murals that I've worked on, but a few. In fact, the very first one I can show it is, can you see it now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So this particular work was one of the initial murals that I worked on, and then, but so there are many ways of doing it. One, they could even do a grid method, form a grid and then try to translate the whole thing onto the wall. And there are some times wherein we do the sketch on paper, in a small paper, and I can even project it on the wall and draw all the outlines. So there are different ways of trying to show that on the wall and then continue painting. Yeah, yeah. And there's one more recent work that I made. This was in, let me find that. Yeah. This was a mural we made in Hills, Malay Mahadeshwara Wildlife Sanctuary, with a bunch of artists. We put together Nature Information Center. And this mural is kind of three-dimensional.
Yeah.
It has different layers. to it. And it's made, this required a lot of planning, and I was really scared to put this together, but it seemed successful. I'm really happy about it. It's different layers, 4 different layers actually. Wherein in the front you can see the white dog and some of the deer, and then back it's the water, it's the tree, um, then the python and the sambar deer, I think, and then behind that it's the water and some branches, the leopard and all that, and then I think behind that is the background, the wall, the elephant and the tiger at the background, the landscape. So this was made out of MDF boards. We had cut it out using big machines, those the big machines that you give it all the instructions, it just cuts them out, and then we had bolted it onto the wall, and then we started painting it.
Oh, wow.
So it required a lot of planning before doing this. But yeah, I wasn't sure how it would end up being, but then it turned out quite okay.
Yeah, I love the fact that the black eagle is hovering outside the frame.
That is the complete outermost layer. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really lovely. So is this on exhibit now?
Yes, it's a permanent, it's a nature information center, and we've done this at the Nature Information Center. Yeah.
Lovely. That's beautiful. So do you work mostly with paints and brushes, or do you use other medium as well?
Most of the time, most of my work has been with canvas, paint, and brush, and mainly acrylic medium is what I use. I've dabbled with a little bit of watercolors, but not as much. But recently, especially since this project and another children book illustration project, I started using a digital tablet, a Wacom, wherein I started doing illustrations on the computer itself. That's my recent.
So that's like a whole new skill that you have to learn.
Yes, it's trying to. I do it mainly on Photoshop, and so I had to learn a lot on Photoshop. And I don't think I still know all the shortcuts and how to be fast at it. But then I'm learning on my own, and just with some friends who like give me some tips and tricks, and yeah, trying to learn that on my own.
So is it still a challenge, or would you much rather you paint with real paints and brushes?
It depends on the project. I pick and choose which I would like to work on. If it's a proper fine art painting, like I would show any species of birds, I would love to paint. Paints and brushes is just my first. I would love to do that. But when it comes to projects which has a tight deadline and a tight budget, or things like that, then I try to do it digitally. In fact, one of the digital works also I can show right here. Yeah, this is one of the recent works that I've worked on. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's this, I did it just last year for A3, the organization. Mainly, this was their, this is putting together all the work of the PhD students that, each one has been working on different topics and in different parts of India, right? So this is putting together all of their works in one illustration.
So you did this with Photoshop?
Yes, Wacom and Photoshop. Yeah.
Very cool.
And again, this was a collaborative work as well. I did it with 2 other friends of mine because it has had a very tight deadline, and then we just put this together.
So let's talk about the other thing that you also do, which is nature journaling, and you really focus on children with that, isn't it? First of all, tell us what is nature journaling and what the children gain from it, the ones that you work with.
So nature journaling is nothing but sketching nature, observing nature, and trying to bring that onto our notebooks. And it's not just about sketches; it's about even writing about our observations, about whatever we are seeing. So this allows them to slow down and look at things up close and start forming their own stories and writing down their own observation. So it just allows them to immerse themselves in nature. So with all, many children getting addicted to gadgets and televisions and mobile phones, this is like something that breaks free, gets them out into nature and gets them to sit around nature and see what inspires them, and try to sketch that and try to understand nature a little more. Try, it could be an insect or a flower or a moth or some leaves, anything. But just sit and just see what the forms are like, see what details you can capture. It just helps them build a connect with nature. So that's what it's helped me a lot. I do a lot of nature journaling. Like, I started doing it myself many years back, and then I was like, why not? And at the same time, when I had gone to the US, nature journaling was a big deal. Even in museums, they would keep a booklet and ask children to like pick it up and go sketch what they see. So I was like really inspired by that. And I was like, okay, why not, introduce children over here to nature journaling as well. And I started these workshops. It's been about 10 years now, and I work with a friend of mine, Shilpa, to do these workshops as well. And we try to do it, especially during holidays, and we also go to schools to do it. And we've worked with a few adults as well, but mostly children.
Yeah, show us an example of what you're talking about.
Sure. Um, well, to say, like, initially when I started off nature journaling, I think it was just so much. Just like, trying my hand at it, trying to just doodle something. Those were the initial stages of it. And later, it slowly evolved more to something like this. This is the cannonball tree. And then later, after that, I've clubbed a whole bunch of my illustrations together. Um, a whole bunch of them, like,
Wow.
started doing a lot more of those.
Are
And
these many pages in your journal?
yes, these are many pages on my journal, yeah, which I've just put them together.
Wow, there's a lot of details. I mean, you're not only sketching, you're also coloring them in and writing notes. And how long does it take a day?
No, it again depends on what you're sketching. It could be 2-3 hours. I'm not putting in, it might feel like I'm putting in too much details, but even in about, 1 hour, 1.5 hour, you should be able to get something on the paper. And then writing, whatever comes to your mind, just feel free to put out what you have in mind. It doesn't have to be super scientific. It could be just your personal feelings about what you feel at that moment, or what exactly you're seeing, any interesting behavior or anything. It doesn't have to be, no one's judging you, like it's just your personal book, your treasured personal book.
So this looks
And
like it's meant for someone with a talent for drawing. So what about people who don't have a talent? How do they do nature journaling?
so initially, like, I think, again, nature journaling, the word might sound like a big word, but I think anybody can do nature journaling if they're interested. I think anybody could sit with a book and pencil and pen, and then just start doodling. And I think they what they do, what they see, and what observations that they gather in their book is what nature journaling is. It is not meant to be, well, because I have an artist tech background. I think my sketches might feel a lot more, leaning towards art and everything. But anybody can do it. Like, here's a bunch of sketches that the children have attempted to do, and they are really nice. And this is just the workshops are just for like 2-3 days, I think, or sometimes 5 days, and by then they're already sketching and painting. So we have a bunch of exercises and initially in our workshops wherein it's about the art of seeing something, and we try to do a bunch of exercises wherein they're training their eyes to first observe and look at things. And once they know how to observe and look at things, that kind of translates onto their notebooks. And um, yeah, that's what nature journaling is about. Trying to observe
So
and sketching them.
in my the last 10 years of my life, I've noticed that there's a lot of artwork to do with nature out there. Earlier, it used to be just photography, and now there are artists of all kinds trying out realistic illustrations, but also abstract painting, or even doing artwork with natural materials. So experimenting with the medium, with the visualization, with the interpretation. But what, when you compare, you've been to the States, you've seen the nature art scene there. What changes would you like to see here? Not just in the art world itself, but do you think people here, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but tell me if it's not your thought. Do you think that people here in the wildlife world don't consider art seriously, and should they be supporting artists and artwork much more?
Mm, well, looking at how the scene is abroad and compared to India, yes, there's a lot of scope for improvement. Especially in the US and UK, there are these big organizations that are like a platform, they're like a house for many artists together who come and share ideas and come and sit and talk about art and painting. Um, and there's a whole bunch of artists over there. Here things are picking up, there are many artists, like the numbers are going up, which is amazing to see. But we still don't have a place where everyone comes together. That would be amazing to see. And the other thing, I think, the value for art there is very different than what it is over here in India. They use wildlife art as a big way of funding conservation projects abroad. But over here, it's still not yet reached that level yet, to that scale that they have in the US and UK. So I'm hoping to see that as well. And as a, coming together as a big, you know, um, artist union together, that would be amazing to see as well.
Okay, so I'm very envious of your talent for painting, but is there a talent that you wish you had?
um, Well, talent wise, I think I would really want to improve on my painting as well, get better and better, because there's so much. I still feel like, when it comes to light, I still haven't got the right way of showing light yet, in paintings. And so I would definitely want to improve on those skills as an artist. And otherwise, I think I would like to talent, write better. I think so, yeah, writing, and then probably being a little more outspoken, probably, if that is considered a talent. I don't know. But then I think that's, I would like to be a little more outspoken, maybe a little more confident or something, yeah.
So, do you think that artists who see, I mean, especially visual artists, see the world differently from normal people like me?
I wouldn't consider you as normal people.
I
So,
don't think visually, I think with words. So whereas you are thinking in terms of pictures, so I just wondered if you see things, see the world differently.
um, I have never thought of that, but I think I uh, probably look into more details. Um, Details of things, and not sure with compared to normal people as such, but um, I think whenever I look at something, I'm always like wondering, oh my god, how can I capture that onto my canvas? Like when I see the shades of greens, um, I'm like really wondering, oh, how can I get that on my canvas? Or like when I see the colors around me, the birds or the behaviors, always wondering how I can get that onto my canvas.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta. That was really lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much, Janaki. Thank you for this.